Welcome to Alchemical Science. I'm Jordan, an open source researcher and a student of the inventor and vortex fusion specialist Malcolm Bendall. I'm very happy to be finally releasing the long-awaited version 2 of the Thunderstorm Generator DIY Experimenter's Build Guide. This video details from start to finish how to strip down a standard petrol generator with a carburetor and install the 3 units of the Thunderstorm Generator: the ionizer, the Plasmoid generator or bubbler, and the Vajra, the Thunderstorm generator itself. I also give a basic overview of how to set up, run, and conduct tests on the device, and talk through some of the safety guidelines to be aware of. And make sure you hold out to the end of the video, where I speak with an experienced boilermaker and welder, Garry, who offers some good general advice on constructing and welding the Thunderstorm Generator Vajra yourself, based on his experience working on a successful independent replication with Saxon van Bendall in Australia. Before we begin, I would like to thank Garry, Saxon, Jack, Ricky, Ben, Nick, Adrian, and of course Steve Monkhurst for all of their assistance in helping me to get this build guide together earlier this year. I only just recently met all of these guys at a demo in Lismore in Australia, organized by Roger Green in February this year. And after this, they all just dropped what they were doing at the time. They took time off work and came together to help build Thunderstorm generators and put this video together. So this build guide was truly a community effort. So please leave your thanks to our Australian build team in the comments for taking the time out to help. Jack, a Solder the Earth Aussie mechanic, has his own channel on TikTok where he talks about the Thunderstorm generator quite a bit. So be sure to check out the links in the description and subscribe to him there if you're interested to hear his perspective. Ben was also kind enough to set up a Discord server for experimenters wishing to discuss their Thunderstorm generator builds, and you can also find that link in the description. So thanks, Ben. A few further notes before we begin. I mention a Thunderstorm generator kit set several times during this guide. And this is in reference to the kit set that was temporarily available from Plasmoid Power in Thailand. And this is not currently available to purchase as of the recording of this intro. There were some issues with the original kit sets that were sent out earlier this year, which were later identified by Malcolm and myself when we were sent units to trial. And this is disappointing, but I am happy to say that as soon as the issues were identified and brought up with the manufacturer, they paused production immediately and committed to replacing any kit sets which had already been sent out to customers that had issues. So if you are one of these customers and you're not able to get satisfactory results from your Thunderstorm generator kit set, then I encourage you to reach out to Plasmoid Power in Thailand to let them know. I've been in contact with them recently myself, and they're gearing up for production again now with all the issues resolved. And of course I will announce on the channel when these experimenters kit sets are available again for purchase. I have a couple quick disclaimers to mention. This build guide is intended for research and non-commercial use only. Strike Foundation holds the intellectual property for the Thunderstorm generator, and the technology is licensed for commercial production and distribution in quite a number of countries now. So if you're interested in being involved in a commercial way, you'll need to go through Strike Foundation or one of the existing active licensees, such as Alpha Prospects, depending on what your deal is. I've provided email addresses for Strike Foundation and Alpha Prospects here, where you can reach out to either entity with questions in regards to investment, licensing, or distribution, etc. I'm not soliciting here. I'm simply an apprentice of Malcolm Bendall. I'm not an employee or a representative of Strike Foundation or Alpha Prospects, so please do not send commercial or investment inquiries to me. I'll not be able to assist, which is why I'm providing the details here. And as usual, I thank Strike Foundation and Alpha Prospects for supporting me in putting out this build guide for a second time, version 2, and trying to help educate the world more about these technologies and about the atomic reconstruction process that occurs in the Thunderstorm generator. The last thing, and then we'll get on to the build guide. There are, of course, inherent dangers to altering an engine outside of the manufacturer's specifications, so please take the safety guidelines noted in the build guide seriously. The Thunderstorm generator is an electromagnetic device, among other things, and it cannot be simply treated like an exhaust pipe, and I've seen many people who think they know what they're doing try and do just this, and so I need to mention it strongly. I take absolutely no responsibility for your safety, and I'll not be held liable if you blow yourself up, electrocute yourself, or otherwise come to any harm as a result of trying to follow this guide or trying to retrofit a Thunderstorm generator. Malcolm Bendall's Thunderstorm Generator. Build, Operation and Tuning Guide. Step-by-step guide to installation. Perform baseline tests on the unaltered engine before beginning installation of the Thunderstorm generator, as the Thunderstorm generator and the engine will become infused with plasmoids even after running the engine with the Thunderstorm generator just once. This baseline testing can include exhaust gas analysis, thermal imaging, fuel consumption, mass spectrometry, etc. Tests can be performed with and without the muffler attached, and with and without a load attached. Ideally, generally a continuous 1000 to 2000 watt load depending on the generator. After completing your baseline tests, strip off the air intake and the casing from the carburetor, exhaust, and the muffler. Remove the fuel tank. You can cut the generator frame with a grinder if it's necessary to help remove it. Ensure the fuel tank is emptied and free of fumes before using the grinder. Remove the carburetor and the plastic spacer from the air intake. You can cut the generator frame with a grinder if it's necessary to help remove it. You'll need to disconnect the governor temporarily. Make up your own spacer block for the air intake if required. We've got to get some holes in the spacer block and trim it down so it fits the engine.
So there's a small pipe clamp on the back of this. I'm going to grind that off so that it'll sit flat on that. Make sure it's central here. Mark and drill those two holes, and then I'll have to cut away a couple bit of nylon to make it fit.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Install the Venturi tube in the spacer block as shown. Install the spacer blocks and reinstall the carburettor as shown. You may need to cut back part of the engine casing to fit everything comfortably. Nice and in the middle. If we put a P, it'd be right in the center there. And so this has got to go on so that the opening is facing in here. And that goes on first. So we've got our gasket here with a little bit of high temp silicon on it, pre-done. It should slide on easily now. Use gaskets between the fittings as shown. No gasket is required between the carburetor and plastic spacer as it was originally. Reconnect the governor and choke wires. Weld or screw on the Vajra to an exhaust flange suitable for your engine. So you can see this is the fitting that comes with the kit set. Just this brass that screws on the end there. Then we've got this one, which is welded on here, which is a little better. It's not the neatest weld, this one, but it's better to have this welded on, and that's a custom bit there. So kit set, custom bit, and this is going to go onto the exhaust of the engine. Fit the Vajra to the exhaust. You may need to cut down the cooling fins on the engine at your own risk and use an exhaust gasket to seal here. Yep. So if you're having trouble getting these out, you can see Steve's just done a trick here where he's put one nut on regularly and then he's put one nut on backwards, and now he can get the spanner in there and easily undo these without the vice grips. We're going to take off the fins down there and this fin here, and that's just going to give us a lot more room to work and a bit of room for the Thunderstorm Generator spheres to go. So now we're just going to put a bit of silicon on the gasket there. We're going to have to put our threads back in as well.
Oh yeah, should do.
So same way we took them off, they're just going back in there. Okay, so we're putting the Vajra on there. We've got the gasket in place in the middle there, and you can see that the threads aren't quite long enough because we've got less space. So we're just going to put a few washers on there to pack it out a bit so that we can screw it back on. Install brackets to support the bubbler and ionizer with fittings and valves pre-fitted on the frame of the engine as shown. Ensure the bottom of the ionizer is no lower than around 2/3 of the way up the bubbler. This is to ensure that water doesn't come into the ionizer through the connecting pipe. So this is what we did on the other model, and you can see that that's a little bit neater there, just a bit of aluminium flat bar. Alright, so we just got 2 solid bars there to mount our bubbler and our ionizer to. So now we're just going to mount these 2 brackets, so one for the ionizer over here on the left, I don't know if you can see that on the camera there, and then one for the bubbler just afterwards there. So they'll be mounted like that. Alright, so now that we've got the brackets mounted, we can just put on the ionizer unit and the bubbler, and you can have a little bit of play here to position them We're going to calculate pipes for them next. So this is the other bubbler that you can find in my DIY build guide with Steve Monkhurst. So you can find out all the instructions on how to make one of those up. They're quite a lot bigger than the ones in the kit set, and they produce really, really good results making these larger bubblers, but it's the same thing. So you've got the funnel, you've got the air stone, you've got the steel wool and the green scrubbies all packed down. It's just got a bit more space, it's a bit larger, and it's a homemade one, but you can check out all the details on how to make that on the video in the description. And this is the homemade ionizer unit as well, not the one from the kit set. So you can see it's just made up of some PVC pipe. The light goes in the top there. Nothing special about it. Bit of plastic and the same valve set up on the bottom with the valve to turn on and off the bubbler here and the filling valve there. All fittings should be sealed with PTFE tape or high temperature thread lock. There must be no vacuum leaks in the system. Bend and fit 3/4 inch copper pipe between the ionizer to the input fitting at the bottom of the bubbler. Ensure the copper pipe has a smooth bend as shown here, so no sharp 90-degree angles. And again, if you're using the kit set, this will come with it. Prepare and install a heat and EMF shield between the engine, the fuel tank and the Vajra. This should be spray painted matte black, and you could use iron or aluminium or stainless steel here, something that will act as an EMF and heat shield. And this isn't included in the kit set, but it is something that's recommended. All right, so the guys have put in the heat shield. You can see there's just a little bracket to keep it steady here, and it's screwed into the frame there. There's some space between the engine and there's some space between the Vajra. Bend and fit a 3/4 inch copper pipe between the output of the bubbler and the input of the Vajra as shown. Smooth curves or one straight length are important. Remember, no sharp 90-degree angles, and the copper pipes cannot be touching the frame or any part of the device. And depending on the size of your engine, for smaller engines, you might be able to get away with 1/2 inch copper pipe here, and we tried that out too. But 3/4 inch pipe, certainly between the ionizer and the bubbler, and then 3/4 inch copper pipe here between the bubbler and the input of the Vajra seems to be ideal. Bend and fit a 1/2 inch copper pipe to fit from the output of the 3-inch inner sphere of the Vajra to the spacer block at the input of the carburettor. And the end of the pipe should go through into the spacer block, almost touching the bottom. And you'll need to cut an angle into the 1/2 inch pipe at the spacer end as shown here. Use a round file to smooth off any sharp edges on your cut. Plasmoids will discharge on sharp edges or points, so we want to avoid these. Reinstall the fuel tank in a raised position as shown, and reconnect the fuel input of the engine using a longer fuel line, which will probably be necessary in most cases. We're just going to move this bar over to the back of the engine, and this is where we're going to attach the EMF shield and the fuel tank. All right, so we've just made this little DIY mount for our fuel tank here. Ours sits on a little bit of an angle, hence what's going on here, and sits on like that. Very nicely. If you're using an engine that has one of these larger 25-litre fuel tanks,
The easiest way to raise this is to just use threaded rod and raise it up there, bolt it on there, and you can have it sitting up above the engine, and you'll find plenty of points on the frame to be able to install that.
Ensure all fittings are tight and appropriately sealed, and you'll probably have to run the engine for a little while and then make sure your carburetor assembly is tight again and everything is tight. You need to, if you're using copper olives on your compression fittings to the copper pipes, then you need to make sure all of these are really quite tight to crush it all in there. And also coating all fittings and joints with epoxy or high temperature silicon after an initial run of the engine. And retightening anything again that needs to be retightened is good practice, and this helps prevent minor vacuum leaks forming once you're happy with your system. Safety checklist. Check that copper pipes are not touching any part of the frame or engine. Ensure the fuel tank is a minimum of 16 inches away from the Vajra. Ensure the fuel tank is completely full with fuel. In experimental units, we wish to minimize the risk that flammable gases pose. Accidentally or intentionally overcharging the system can result with plasmoids arcing from the spheres, so we just want to keep the fuel tank away from that for obvious reasons. Ensure a steel or aluminium heat and EMF shield is installed between the Vajra and the engine and the fuel tank as shown. Setup. Ensure the fuel tank is completely full. Ensure oil is filled to the engine specifications. Ideally, if working on a new engine, oil should be flush once and replaced before running for the first time to remove any unwanted sediment.
Fill up the bubbler with water. The required level will vary a little depending on the engine being retrofit. However, a good starting point is to fill the bubbler around 1/3 of the way, a few inches above the porous air stone or disc. Remember though that the input pipe to the bubbler will also fill with water, so you'll not be able to see the true level of the bubbler until the system is run and the water has all been vacuumed up into the bubbler chamber. Add water as necessary once you can see the actual level in the bubbler, following the instructions in the tuning guide to find the optimal water level for your system.
Plug in the ionizing light bulb to the output of the generator using a double adapter or power board if you only have one outlet and are running a load as well. It's best to use surge protection for experimental trials.
To ensure that we have a load, so our ionizer is plugged in here, and then we've also got 2000 volts worth of lights, which is a good load for this engine. This 8 kVA 390cc. So if you're using something a little bit smaller, you might only want a 1000 watt load. If you're using something a bit bigger, maybe you'll want a larger load.
Check over the unit from all sides, ensuring the pipes or other parts are not grounding out or at risk of vibrating against the frame, engine, or other parts. Take positions to record the experiment, ideally a gas analyzer, for example the Kane Auto Plus, as we're using in the video, and thermal camera or other thermal and exhaust analysis equipment could be used to record results from trials. Ensure that no sensors touch the inside of the pipes of the Vajra, the Thunderstorm Generator sphere. Use a stand or vice clamp to position the sensor central in the exhaust of the Thunderstorm Generator sphere without touching the sides of the pipe. Arrange cameras ready to film the experiment and other analysis tools and enable any auto-logging functions on the equipment, ensuring the correct time and date is set. Turn the gas analyzer on or other analysis equipment, ensuring you're in an open area with clean air to correctly calibrate the device. On a certified Kane gas analyzer, you have 10 to 15 minutes from calibration to perform the experiment before you'll need to take the device in clean air again to recalibrate, so be ready to perform the experiment before calibrating the gas analyzer.
Is press the on button, and You'll see you just need to be in clean air so that we're getting a proper reading. And here we go. It takes about 1.5 minutes to calibrate, and then we're able to hook that up to the engine.
Operation. Ensure the bubbler valve is turned off. Turn on the fuel. Check for air leaks, fuel leaks, bubbler leaks, or other issues before first operation. Ensure the experiment is being recorded and cameras and equipment are prepared. Start the engine as normal with the choke closed, and then open the choke to keep the engine running smooth as it warms up, as per the normal operating instructions in your engine's manual. Let the engine warm up for around 10 minutes. Because we've adjusted the positioning of the carburetor by adding the spacer block, if the engine runs rough, you may have to retune back to baseline specifications. Adjust the idle screw, the governor screw, and the choke to tune the engine until it's running normally, around mid-range. Ensure that the UV light bulb in the ionizer is turned on and working. Turning on and tuning the Thunderstorm Generator. There are 4 primary variables to methodically adjust when tuning the Thunderstorm Generator. 1. The bubbler valve. 2. The choke. 3. The idle screw. 4. The governor. And just a quick note here, it's best to run the unit for several hours minimum to raise the pH of the water the first time running the system, and this preconditions the water for consistently improved results later on. The variables to adjust for tuning the Thunderstorm Generator. Follow operative steps to warm up the engine before turning on the Thunderstorm Generator. Slowly ease the bubbler valve on. Do not fully open the valve, only open very slowly, degree by degree. This valve controls the rate at which the atmosphere equalizes through the water under vacuum, the rate that the bubbles are forming and collapsing in the system. Close the choke valve to around 95% as you ease on the bubbler. Most of the air should be coming through the ionizer and the bubbler intake now, although a small amount of air will still be generally needed through the choke. The choke can be adjusted to fine-tune and find an ideal balance between the airflow through the carburetor and the bubbler. 1. Listen to the engine's revs by ear and fine-tune using the 4 variables that we've discussed. We're aiming to emulate the airflow that would be going into the engine normally, for example, when we're not retrofitted with a Thunderstorm Generator. The other goal is to create enough back pressure and vacuum to form and collapse bubbles in the Plasmoid generator or bubbler. Observe the bubbler while tuning. The water level should be below the steel wool. Excess water above the steel wool will not form microbubbles and can be pulled through into the engine where it can cause issues. Instead, a thick greyish or milky white foam should develop above the steel wool. This is the indication that the bubbler is performing optimally, filled to the appropriate level and maintaining good vacuum. Adjust the bubbler water if necessary, but make sure to check for good vacuum and do some initial tuning before adding water. It's easier to add more water than to take it out later. Adjust the choke along with the idle screw and the governor adjustment screw and tune the engine to run smoothly further by ear. Make small adjustments and then return to open the bubbler valve a little more as necessary. Repeat making adjustments to the bubbler valve and carburetor variables. If possible, reference exhaust gas analysis live while tuning for feedback. When you hit the sweet spot, the engine will run full throttle, and gas analysis and fuel consumption should show significantly better results when compared to the control baselines. Always adjust the bubbler valve first before making adjustment to the carburettor variables, after initially tuning the engine to manufacturer spec. Adjusting the bubbler valve is always the first step when tuning an engine retrofit with the Thunderstorm Generator.
Welding the Vajra, the Thunderstorm Generator nested spheres. The easiest way to obtain a Vajra for the U-sphere build is going to be to order one. Alpha Prospects in Thailand are currently working on making a new kit set available, and other manufacturers are gearing up for production around the world too. The nested spheres and pipes of the Vajra do take some time to construct and require precision and a certain amount of skill and quality control, even for an experienced welder, but it can certainly be done. I spoke with Garry, an experienced boilermaker who constructed and welded a Vajra for Saxon van Bentley's independent Thunderstorm Generator replication. Garry offers some good general advice for anyone attempting to weld their own Vajra. I also have some short clips of Vajras being welded in the UK, courtesy of Bendall and his team over there. First though, let's take a quick look at how the Vajra is constructed. 3mm thick 304 stainless steel hemispheres are nested together at the ratio of 4:3:2. Two sets of these nested spheres are connected together by a set of nested pipes with 51.84 degree transitions between the spheres and the pipes. The entire Vajra is constructed of 304 stainless steel. For a retrofit sized for a small generator, these hemispheres will generally simply be 4 inches, 3 inches, and 2 inches. For a vehicle, 8-inch, 6-inch, and 4-inch spheres are generally used instead. It's maintaining the 4:3:2 ratio, which is important here, so the Thunderstorm Generator can be scaled as necessary. For example, the natural gas-powered substation retrofit in the UK used 24-inch, 18-inch, and 12-inch spheres. Now let's hear Garry explain how the Vajra is assembled and welded together. Alright, I'm here with Garry, who did the independent build of the Thunderstorm Generator in Lismore. He's a professional Boilermaker, and he has made up his own spheres for that independent retrofit, and he's just going to run through the process he went through to make up the Vajra for the Thunderstorm Generator.
Well, the very top and bottom spheres need an exhaust out one side, so it comes from the motor. Spins anti-clockwise. We need a 1-inch hole there and a 1/2-inch 9/16 pipe out the other side that goes through that into the inner 3-inch sphere. So to drill a hole through there, piece of angle line on top of the drill press. Sit that up that way vertically, and then I just used a square. Held it up beside the drill, up beside the hole saw, and made sure that it was drilling flush with the outside of the cone. So line it up so that was going straight down in with the cone. That gives a nice transition around the outside. So clamp that, drill that hole, and I marked center and I'd turn it round 180 degrees to drill the other one on the other side with the right size hole saw. The one I just showed you on the drill press there, I made mine that way and welded around horizontally. The one as an example here is has been welded vertically. I made mine the other way so that I could get the right tapers down here. You need your 51.8 degrees on the bottom of the sphere and the top of this sphere and the inner sphere. To do that, where that goes that way, I drilled a hole through there, and I machined up a little tool to actually press that taper in the bottom. So the hole suits the bottom of that die. That in there, that through there, and I put it in a small hydraulic press and pressed down on it. And that gave me the right taper on the bottom of these spheres, so that it blends in with this and you get a nice smooth vortex running through that.
Yeah, great.
So I pressed that one with that die, and I made a second set of dies to press the small 3-inch one, as it's same angle but slightly different diameters.
Yep.
So then I started to assemble. The little 2-inch one was in halves, so I marked halfway with the center square on top and bottom, tack welded the two together, drilled a hole on the center marks, pulled it apart again, slid the rod through that and clamped the rod. What a piece of rod here. Clamped a piece of rod through it, and that created the center 2-inch sphere. And then the two 3-inch spheres, I did a similar thing. I had one with the taper on, one with the hole with this pipe on it, on top. Again, I marked the center line, held the two together, clamped them together, drilled a hole so that that rod would go through, and that aligned the center sphere, dead center. No whistle buts about it, it was spot on.
Yep.
From there, yeah, I tacked that in, welded the two 3-inch spheres, so that was dead center. Did the same the other end, so I had two assemblies like that. And then it gets a bit complicated trying to slide the rod in. You need to weld one rod to one 3-inch sphere, slip the pipe in. You've really got to think about it a little bit as to what your process is. You can't just fully weld these two outside ones. They need to be fully sealed inside, so that if you pressurize this side, it stays in the 3-inch sphere and comes back out this side. It needs to be a completely separate cavity. So you've just got to think about your process. How you're going to weld this one, then that one, then the internal one, and then this outside one. Again, it depends on how you're going to make it, whether you make it that way or I went that way, because that's how I pressed the hole, pressed the taper. So, something you've got to think about yourself.
Anything else about the welding process that you...
Yeah. Every time I was welding these, the center sphere I just welded outside. But when it come to welding the 3-inch sphere, I made sure I had a separate gas line. I TIG welded them all, but I had a separate gas line on my gas bottle that I fed gas in through the bottom of it while I welded around it. That gives you a really nice weld on the inside of the sphere. So it's called purging. So I purged that one and then purged the other one. And when I welded the outside one, I made sure there was gas going in there. Taped up the other end to make sure it had a little bit of pressure in it. There was no oxygen. And it just guarantees you get a really nice weld around the inside.
Yeah, great.
With no penetration, no oxidation. It's going to contaminate anything. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's about it.
About tells the process, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. You just got to think about it a little bit. Your steps in which one you're going to weld first.
Yep.
It is very tricky to get in to weld this last one when you've got one half together.
Yeah.
It is very tricky to get in there. But if you do it the right way, it's not too bad.
Yeah. So really it's about choosing which weld to do first and then which ones to do next, and it'll make your job a lot easier.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thanks, Garry. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.